his flaws are too great, and unfortunately that did get him. He has amazing political talent. If we're completely honest, some of that talent, which is the ability to tell everyone the things that they want to hear and to blur lines about, realism and truth, were the reasons he was successful. So we all have to address that in the fact that that's probably one of the reasons why he did win.
Joined now by the Times columnist and former advisor to William Hague and David Cameron, Danny Finkelstein. Thanks for coming in, Danny. Now, you've written a really interesting piece in the Times today about your personal interactions with Boris Johnson. If people haven't read that piece yet, just sum up what your assessment is.
Yes, it started with a lunch that I had with him about 20 years ago, a little more than that, when we talked about me going to work for him as when he was editor of The Spectator. And he told me the ideas I had for his magazine were tremendous. And I thought he was very talented, and also that we shared a sort of certain liberal instinct. And I was reflecting back on his period as leader and thinking, well, I've learned now that just because he said my ideas were tremendous didn't actually mean he thought they were tremendous. and also that his liberal instinct wasn't a solid thing, that he would move with his audience, and when his audience moves, he did move. So it was really a reflection of the qualities that do make him a very talented writer and wit, but didn't make him a successful prime minister, and indeed meant that I felt very strongly that he had to be removed. And I felt diffident about that at the beginning, because I do like him. I wouldn't say we're ever friends, and he was a very different person to me, but I did always find him congenial company and an interesting person I could share political conversation with. But I think that his flaws, in particular, his desire that he would tell everyone anything they wanted to hear, particularly when they wanted to hear that he hadn't done to them what he just had done, and that was a flaw that ultimately became intolerable. In our system, an awful lot comes down to accepting the integrity of the Prime Minister and the Prime Ministerial office, and when it became not possible for the Prime Minister with authority to say this and that minister has or has not committed an ethical breach, because they themselves were being questioned for an ethical breach, the whole system doesn't work any longer. So part of the search for the next Prime Minister must address that.
I found it interesting that in your piece you're talking about the tension between his liberal instinct and the voters he's courted, and the idea was that they were at very different ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, I do think he one of the reasons why I described Boris Johnson as an ally was my instinct at that time. But subsequent to that, he was one of the first 5 or 6 people, and so was I, who thought David Cameron should be leader of the Conservative Party, because he saw the case for modernising the Conservative Party. Before that, he'd supported Ken Clarke in circumstances when I felt I couldn't, despite the fact that I admired Ken Clarke, because I couldn't accept Ken Clarke's position over Europe, ironically enough. So, whereas I ended up as a Remainer and Boris Johnson as a Leaver. So I did think that represented his politics. And this isn't just watching those things. I often used to talk to him when I worked for the Conservative Party. He would often ring me about his column before he wrote it, and we would argue about it on the phone. And so I do know where he comes from. But in truth, he isn't able or willing to stick to that if his own... Some of it is a weakness, a desire to be liked, but some of it is just his instinct for personal advantage, if I'm being a little bit less generous. And the combination of those two things just made him unacceptable. And what I worried about for the whole of the Conservative Party, but also for the country, was that we would slowly begin to accept that our line would just be crossed, and we'd not even have noticed that we'd crossed it, because each event itself seemed quite small. And one or two people have said to me, why did he resign now and not over one of the other things which you might have regarded as more serious? Well, actually, first of all, I did think not telling the truth about Chris Pincher was pretty serious, considering the nature of the allegations. But in addition, these things are cumulative, and I'm glad that at some point people did realise we were crossing lines and hadn't just shrugged their shoulders and said that terrible phrase, it's all priced in. Well, it can't be.
Are you essentially saying that he had or has character flaws that fundamentally aren't conducive to being a Prime Minister.
Yes, I felt that before he became Prime Minister. I wouldn't be a very good Prime Minister either, because I think my attention wanders sometimes and I can be a bit lazy. I'm probably not physically fit enough to do a job that requires you to be fit. I watched David Cameron do it at very close quarters because I was working on a sort of audio diary of his premiership, so I'd see him all the time, and the energy that it required, and and also the kind of the on itness. That's not terrible. I can't. Forgive me. I just can't. You need to be on it the whole time, and I just wonder whether I wouldn't be drifting off to watch Chelsea play Real Madrid. It just or to think about the goals. I have character flaws. They're different ones. His were very serious, and actually, I remember talking to one or two people right at the beginning of his premiership who thought, it would be advantageous to me to position myself as a supporter of Boris, who's going to win the leadership. This is in 2016. If Theresa May wins the leadership, I'll be out. So maybe I should support Boris. And then concluding, I just can't, because his flaws are too great. And unfortunately, that did get him. He has amazing political talent. If we're completely honest, some of that talent, which is the ability to tell everyone the things that they want to hear and to blur lines about, realism and truth, were the reasons he was successful. So we all have to address that in the fact that that's probably one of the reasons why he did win. He got a deal in the over Brexit because everyone heard from him what they wanted to hear, and he got a deal that way. So some of his winning was related to his character flaws, but in the end, I'm glad the system works in such a way that it wasn't possible for him indefinitely to carry on flawed in that way.
And finally, looking ahead, we were talking to Patrick Maguire earlier, Red Box editor, and he was saying, talking to people all day yesterday, the names that were coming up were Rishi Sunak. He felt that people were underestimating him at this point, but lots of MPs were saying, yeah, they liked him. Sajid Javid as well. What are your thoughts going forward?
It's sort of uncomfortable because they're both very good friends of mine. I do respect them both. I think they are very good candidates. Crucially, they showed the courage to resign. I've long felt Rishi was underappreciated. The truth is, at the bottom of it, MPs like him because they know he's very good, and you have to be very good to be Prime Minister. At the same time, the advantage of Sajid is he has an ethical core, was willing to resign over Dominic Cummings, was willing to resign again. So I think those are very strong candidates. There are other candidates, definitely, but I think Rishi Sunak has been... The idea that Rishi Sunak would ultimately win anyway, despite the things that were said about him, that the setbacks he faced, I think has been underestimated. And it would be my anticipation that he would win. And I think that would be a very, speaking as someone who's worked with him, he doesn't have the flaws that I identified in Boris Johnson. And I think ethically and in terms of competence to do the job, people would be able to have confidence in him.
Really good for you coming in. Thank you so much. Do come back. Come back again. Danny Finkelstein there. Thank you so much.